Joining us now to discuss is Peter Schweizer, author of Blood Money, Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye While China Kills Americans. Thank you so much for coming on. I know that you have been investigating Tim Walz and his ties to China. What do you make of this latest update from an anonymous intelligence official?
Yeah, anytime it's an anonymous source and they don't give specifics, that in essence the message is, well, just trust me based on my authority, you really have to dismiss it. And the bottom line is you just have to look at Tim Walz's history, not just the fact that he's traveled to China, not just the fact that he speaks Chinese, okay, it's who he deals with, what he was telling students, what he has done as governor of Minnesota, and it all speaks to what used to be known during the Cold War as a fellow traveler. It doesn't mean that he's necessarily a CCP agent, but it means he's sympathetic to the CCP, wants to see them succeed, and is willing to do things to help them advance their own agenda.
I see you tweeted a report that Tim Walz welcomed Chinese Communist Party officials into his own Nebraska classroom as well.
Yeah, there's lots of things when you look back during his tenure as a teacher. He had CCP officials that came into his classroom. When students were taken to China, he would advise them, according to press accounts at the time, he would advise them to downplay their Americanness. Which is an odd thing to say. This is supposed to be a cultural exchange. That's how you learn about each other. He also, according to those contemporary press accounts, told students that in China their society was different, that they were not going to see poor people, which of course is not true. A lot of poverty in China. He said you're not going to see poverty because unlike our system, in China they actually share. Which either means that he was incredibly naive about the Chinese dictatorial system, or he was, as I said, a fellow traveler. If you flash forward now to look during his tenure as governor of Minnesota, you find similar kind of hallmarks of this behavior. From 2018 up through 2023, Minnesota is really the only state that has increased rapidly its investment in Chinese companies. He's the head of the Minnesota State Investment Board that invests pension money. And at the same time, during that 5-year period that states like California and Washington State were freezing increased investment in China, and states like Florida and Texas were actually reducing their investments in China, only Minnesota was actually adding to its portfolio of Chinese companies to the tune of $1 billion. That puts him clearly out of line with what other state investment pension funds were doing. It's odd, and I think it deserves an explanation because, as has been widely known, and the reason we saw so many states pulling back their investments, these investment dollars usually go and ultimately benefit the Chinese military-industrial complex.
Wow. So just bringing this back to the average American citizens, the viewers watching the show, I mean, how does this apply to them? If he makes it into the executive branch of government, what's your big concern?
Well, the concern is that, number one, Kamala Harris would make him the point person on policy towards China. He would say, I know them, I speak their language, I've been there a lot, even though he has no foreign policy experience. He would become the point person. Point number two, he is incredibly naive and apologetic for what China does. Even when he brings up China human rights problems, whether it's the Uyghurs or what's going on in Tibet, he always adds to the fact that, well, we have human rights problems in the United States that are just as bad, in his words. So he doesn't have the kind of moral clarity that you need to confront an adversary like China that is building up its military, that's engaged in a whole host of behaviors that are designed to cause problems in the United States like fentanyl. He simply does not have the moral clarity or I think the fortitude to deal effectively with China. So I think it would have enormously bad implications for our national security policy.
Well, we've seen the reversal of certain policies that were pro-America, anti-China, that were in place under Trump. Biden seems to be catering to China, is what I'm saying. I mean, there was a program under Trump that to stop spies that were stealing intellectual information from universities and bringing it to China. Biden gets rid of that, calling it racist. So it's racist to, be observant of a foreign nation?
Yeah, exactly. Or you look at Tim Walz as governor of Minnesota. Minnesota is the site of one of 5 known so-called Chinese police stations in the United States. These have been identified by the FBI. They're linked to the Chinese intelligence service, and they're designed to intimidate Chinese Americans who are U.S. citizens, to intimidate them from criticizing the CCP. Not only is there one in the Twin Cities, that police station is affiliated with something called Global Minnesota, which is connected to Tim Walz. Tim Walz knows the people that run the police station. He has never criticized them. He has never done anything to curtail their activities. So, yeah, you're going to get more appeasement with Tim Walz. And you're going to have, I think, serious implications for the national security of the United States, not just in economic terms, but in military terms.
Scary stuff. Glad we're shedding light on this before the elections. People can kind of decide what they want to vote on, or if you want to trust Peter Schweizer's analysis or the AP's anonymous source. Up to you guys, the voters. Peter, great having you on.
Thanks for having me, Ivory.